Though I can appreciate complexity and depth in the games I play, the value of simple, intuitive fun cannot be overstated. Sure, it's way easier for an experience to wear thin without varied or involved mechanics, but it is possible to offset this by simply keeping a game's pace up. Just look at the latest contender for the Battle Royale crown, Fall Guys Ultimate Knockout. It's a game that features literally 4 inputs, and yet I've already gotten way more fun and time out of it than most recent multiplayer games. Now, although I've called Fall Guys the latest contender for the Battle Royale crown, it's not exactly what you might think of when I say the term. The premise is that you and up to 59 other Fall Guys, which are these goofy little bean people, are competing in a series of obstacle courses and challenges in the style of Takeshi's Castle or Wipeout. Games carry on for 5 or so rounds, with competitors being eliminated on a per round basis before you compete in a final challenge to win a crown. It's a pretty simple premise, which is why it's so mind-blowing to me that no one has bothered to make a game like this before now, especially with massive elimination-based multiplayer games blowing up over the past few years. Battle Royale but make it a platformer/party game hybrid seems like a no-brainer, but here we are. And that conceptual simplicity runs through practically every element of Fall Guys, whether we're talking about its addictive gameplay or the game's delightful presentation. Seriously, Fall Guys Ultimate Knockout is such a joy to play thanks in large part to the colourful, no-frills aesthetic that it brings to the table. The Fall Guys themselves are super cute due to their squishy round designs, and though they lack any distinguishing features out of the gate, they are the perfect canvas for players to personalise and customise them with the game's range of cosmetic items. The rest of the game captures this sense of joy as well through its use of big, colourful environments and obstacles, the flat textures of which giving off the impression that they're made of foam, soft plastic, or rubber. The only items in the game that don't fit this description are comically oversized pieces of fruit, as well as the pink slime found beneath most challenge arenas, and I really just appreciate the game's commitment to lighthearted fun through these vibrant visuals. The game's music heavily contributes to Fall Guys' sense of pure joy as well, with plenty of upbeat tracks that match the game's chaotic, non-stop action really well. It's genuinely difficult to not have a smile on your face during most rounds of this game, since the soundtrack is so energetic and infectious, all while being punctuated by the silly woos of Fall Guys flying around the stage. And those Fall Guys sure will fly, jump, dive, and yes, fall a lot during almost every round of the game. Hell, simply jumping and diving are half of the game's inputs, with the other 2 being simple movement with the left stick and grabbing via the right trigger. While this sounds basic to a fault, this handful of easy to pick up mechanics allows the game to be fairly versatile with its game modes, since it won't take long for players to simply know how the Fall Guys work after only a few seconds of piloting them. But even though Fall Guys does introduce some more gameplay variety through its cavalcade of round types, even these are incredibly simple to pick up and play. Each round will give you a quick look at the arena, as well as a 1-sentence description of the round's objectives, and within a few seconds you're off and playing, without any tutorials outside of the opening screens of the game where you're told which buttons do what. On the subject of game types, they often vary wildly even within the broad categories that they get grouped into. Races task you with getting to the finish line before a certain number of other competitors to win or qualify. Pretty straightforward. But these races can contain swinging ball or door obstacles, spinning platforms that disorient you, or massive seesaws that rise and fall based on the number and position of the Fall Guys currently occupying them, and these are just a handful of examples. Personally, this category is my favourite of all the game types, since they so often devolve into mad, chaotic scrambles for the finish line after something has gone horribly wrong. They are the Fall Guys experience at its most pure. Next up are the survival game modes, which typically require you to outlast a certain number of your opponents or until a timer runs out. These games can involve moving obstacles that knock you off the arena, like Jump Club or Block Party, or can even involve you trying to steal tails in a frantic game of tag in order to survive. So often, these events turn into massive player pileups as people try to shove the competition into harm's way or just generally fall over each other. Again, these are very much what Fall Guys is all about, but not all of the survival game types are winners. This all comes down to personal taste, of course, but the games that slow down the frantic pace of Fall Guys are easily my least favourite aspect of the game. The absolute nadir of the experience is Perfect Match, a game that asks you to memorize symbols throughout the arena before making sure that you're standing on a symbol that the game reveals once the timer counts down. Now, Perfect Match is not the only offender when it comes to slowing down the pace of the game. I'm looking at you, Rollout. But it's certainly the worst offender, and the handful of game types I would lump in with it just feel like a lot of waiting around, while very few people actually get eliminated. The game's team rounds are also a little hit or miss. They can make for some fast-paced fun when you're playing games that need a lot of continuous motion and reading other players' movements, like Team Tail Tag or Hoopsie Daisy, but I can take or leave the modes that require you to hoard more points than the opposing teams. Those very quickly result in the 2 winning teams ganging up on the losing team to make sure they lose, and regardless of the result, I almost always leave those modes feeling bummed out for someone. But at least Fall Ball, the game's version of soccer, is pretty fun, I guess. Honestly though, there are too many individual game types for me to cover them all in depth, but I think these categories give you a good sense of what the game has to offer, and overall, I think Fall Guys' selection of modes is generally a fun time. As I've said, the game is at its best when the games are fast and chaotic, and while there are a handful of modes that slow that pace down, they're definitely in the minority. On the whole, the entire game is beautifully paced, as most rounds take under 3 minutes to complete, and if you're good enough to make it to the final round of a game, or episode, the entire experience can take less than 15 minutes to wrap up. And if you aren't lucky enough to make it to the final round, you can leave the game you just lost and jump into another one within a minute or two. Now, I have run into a handful of connection issues in the first 2 weeks of the game's launch, but generally speaking, these were infrequent occurrences, and getting into a new game has always been pretty fast. Nope, my biggest issue with the game isn't its server issues, which I am aware of but haven't really encountered much in my experience with the game. Instead, I take issue with the game's use of microtransactions that let you purchase one of the game's currencies, which can in turn be used on cosmetic items such as outfits and animations. Most of this boils down to my usual aversion to microtransactions. Unless a game is entirely free to play, I think they're gross and I think they have no place being in a full price game. But Fall Guys is unique in that the currency you can purchase, called kudos in-game, is incredibly easy to get simply by playing. You even get bonus kudos for finishing events in certain positions or being on the winning team in team games, so you don't have to actually win any full episodes to rake them in. This ultimately leaves the microtransactions feeling weirdly unnecessary, so why even bother adding them? But credit where credit is due, at least Fall Guys doesn't let folks buy its secondary currency, crowns. You get these by winning entire episodes of the game, or by leveling up in its Battle Pass style season progression, which seems fair enough. My only complaint here is that the coolest items that you can spend your crowns on are ludicrously overpriced, coming in at 10 crowns for a full outfit in some cases. This weird overpricing combined with the relative uselessness of the game's microtransactions has me wary of future updates that might make the in-game purchases more malicious than they are by simply being present. But this is all purely conjecture on my part, so please take it with all the grains of salt. At this stage, the microtransactions aren't that bad, but they are there, and they could get worse. Speaking of taking things with a grain of salt, Fall Guys Ultimate Knockout is a live service game, which means that, in theory, the game that I reviewed today may be unrecognizable even a few months down the line. Even at time of writing, we've seen what the next season of content will bring, including new outfits and match types, and there's been new match types added since launch already, so any criticism I have now will surely be outdated pretty quickly. But if the game takes this strong start and runs with it, then Fall Guys may just be the live service game that I hitch my wagon to for the foreseeable future, unless it goes crazy with microtransactions. So with all that said, Fall Guys Ultimate Knockout is excellent. With its basic control scheme and intuitive game modes, Fall Guys Ultimate Knockout makes for an incredibly chaotic and fun pick-up and play experience. This would make for a perfectly fine game on its own, but what really makes Fall Guys great is its constant forward momentum. Rounds are over quickly, the load screens between rounds are quick, hell, even leaving a game and entering another one is quick. There's never a moment where you're waiting to play for more than 30 seconds, and that really helps the game get its hooks in despite it being a pretty straightforward time overall. Even the inclusion of microtransactions, confusingly superfluous though they may be, can't detract from my positivity about this game. If you like chaotic fun and massive elimination-based multiplayer, you should totally check this one out. Fall Guys Ultimate Knockout is currently available on PS4 and PC.